Hello, Filmscape. I'd like to take this opportunity to formally welcome everyone to the Hub at CineSpace. So this is a joint collaboration between the Independent Film Alliance of Chicago and AbelCine, and is a natural evolution of the mission of both organizations. We've reimagined the space for those that are physically here, as you see. So it's been reimagined to be a co-working space where we can hold programming like this. Of course, we have the co-working space outside, but this theater, of course, is fantastic for those events. In addition, working along with the IFA, we'll be working on educational programming. What that means is stuff like creative, inspirational events, like we have this great panel here today, but also some emerging technology programming, maybe some skills such as, whether it's Steadicam or camera operating or lighting and everything else like that, with the goal, of course, of making them available to the independent film community. We've been thrilled to be able to host this entire weekend's worth of great events. We've heard from some really fantastic panelists and had some great discussions in this room. We're definitely looking forward to seeing more and more of the very vibrant Chicago filmmaking community at all future events. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to our live stream, or of course for those here in the audience with us. And I would like to formally introduce tonight's moderator, who will then formally introduce the rest of her guests. Angie Gaffney is the IFA's executive director, and she's moderating tonight's panel. So, Angie, take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks everyone for being here in person and also at home. We're so excited to be partnered with AbelCine on this space. It's much higher end than our old office, let's just be honest. They bring the tech, we bring the independent film community and the colorful chairs. So thus far it's been a really wonderful partnership. We're going to dive right in here. I will introduce our panelists in just a second. For those of you who don't know much about IFA, we are a nonprofit organization, Independent Film Alliance Chicago. We are a member-based organization, and our mission is to provide the community and resources needed to build a diverse and sustainable industry of independent content creators. And we're super excited to have a panel that features independent filmmakers, union folks, commercial directors, folks with a wide variety of experience, so we can start to bridge kind of some of those silos within the industry here in Chicago. A quick note that our panelist Jennifer Reeder is very committed in traveling from Indiana. She's running late. She will join us at some point mid-panel, and we'll make sure she gets her questions in. All right, so without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. I will start over here with Jim Vendiola. Jim is waiting. Let's give a round of applause for Jim. Thank you. Jim is an award-winning writer, director, development executive, and 3-time New City Film 50 honoree. His work has been described as highly stylized and casually transgressive, and frequently explores ideas of heartache, longing, intimacy, and eros and pathos. As a Filipino-American with immigrant parents, his work also ponders themes of identity, otherness, and alienation. His psychological horror short, Violets, which reframes the genre's more common predator-prey dynamic, received the 22nd Chicago Underground Film Festival's Audience Award. His kink-positive follow-up, which I'm very excited to see, Library Hours, is a reimagined approach to vintage erotica, nominated for Best Short Film by New Filmmakers LA. Jim's debut feature, a supernatural thriller called Homesick, is currently in late development with the Chicago Film Project. And I will also plug and say, if you would like to learn more about his work, you can visit him online at jimvendiola.com. Give it up for Jim. Yep. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. All right, next to Jim, my friend Christopher Rejano. He was born and raised in the shadows of Detroit and versed in early MTV skateboard videos and American independent cinema. Now based in Chicago, he has forged a career in feature film, commercials, and television. A mentorship under Laszlo Kovacs, thank you. ASC made a major impact on him and solidified his aims toward being the best person for every job. Rejano's approach to aesthetic is one influenced by the necessity of proper storytelling and not by the pitfalls of following the latest trends. Often cited for a hearty Midwestern work ethic, which we love, has resulted in his work being featured at the Sundance Film Festival, South by Southwest, Berlinale, Tribeca, among others. Rejano is a member of the International Cinematographers Guild Local 600, and you can also learn more about his work at chrisrejano.com. Give it up for Chris. All right, fun fact about Betsy Peoples, we went back to like DePaul days. And we haven't really spoken much since, but I'm so glad she's here and we can reconnect on this panel. Betsy was born and raised in northeastern Indiana. She got her undergraduate degree in photography from Indiana University and her graduate degree, where we crossed paths, at DePaul University for cinematography. She has experience in multiple departments: art, grip and electric, wardrobe, hair and makeup, camera, and she joined Local 600 in 2013. So that's been what, 11 years, if my math is correct.
12 years.
12 years.
It depends on when you're talking about in the year.
Yeah.
It was the end of the year.
End of the year. 12 years-ish. She came up through the camera department after starting in digital utility, and she is a Local 600 elected National Executive Board member. And she's also a member of the Local 600 Central Region Council, the Young Workers Committee, the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, as well as a participant in the Training Committee and a number of working groups.
Yes.
So we are going to ask a lot of questions about that because that is a world I don't know a lot about. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, give it up for Betsy. Sorry, One more round of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read Jennifer Reeder's introduction and bio, and then we'll give her a shout and then a round of applause when she gets here formally. Jennifer Reeder was recently named by how do I say it?
Bong Joon-ho.
Thank you, Bong Joon-ho, as a filmmaker to watch in the 2020s. She constructs personal fiction films about relationships, trauma, and coping. Her award-winning narratives are innovative and borrow from a range of forms, including after-school specials, amateur music videos, and magical realism. These films have shown consistently around the world, including the Sundance Film Festival, the Berlin Film Festival, Tribeca, Rotterdam, London Film Festival, South by Southwest, Venice, the Whitney Biennial. Her most recent film, Knives and Skin, was theatrically released in France in November 2019 through UFO, and in the US in December 2019 through IFC Midnight. She wrote and directed a section of the 2021 horror anthology VHS 94 from Shudder, and is currently in pre-production for a new feature-length film called Perpetrator, which is being produced by 30 West, Divide and Conquer, and WTF Films. To learn more about her work, also visit thejenniferreeder.com. So we'll give her a warm welcome when she joins us. All right. Thank you all for being here. Such a pleasure to have you on this Sunday evening. I want to start off with a really serious question, just to break the ice a little bit, and that is, what is your favorite breakfast cereal and why is it superior? Betsy?
I will say that cereal was never something that I ate a lot of, but when I did eat cereal, it was almost always Fruit Loops.
Fruit Loops. Lots of color in Fruit Loops. Mm-hmm. Lots of sugar in Fruit Loops.
Lots of sugar.
Thanks, Betsy.
I guess it would have to be Lucky Charms. And we were just kind of talking about how there was a new version of Lucky Charms where there's spaceships and planets and stuff like that in it. So I don't know if they're actually charms anymore. But I think I had them a couple weeks ago and they were still pretty good.
Do you pick the Lucky Charms? Do you pick the marshmallows out, or do you eat it all in one?
I mean, I definitely
separate.
Yeah.
Separate. Yeah. Fair.
Save
marshmallows first.
It depends. Yeah, you gotta
play it by ear.
Play it by ear, because sometimes they get too wet and just kind of get slimy.
They get a little soggy.
Right.
Thrilling. All right, Jim, what do you got?
I'm gonna have to go with Cookie Crisp. I think because, as a kid, you're not allowed to have cookies for breakfast, but you can have like 200 tiny ones, apparently. That's acceptable.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. It's a loophole.
Loophole. I love it. I was always a cinnamon person, so I was more in the Cinnamon Toast Crunch life, cinnamon vibe. Less exciting. All right. Well, thank you for humoring me with that. Thank you all for listening. I have a few questions. I want to kick it off actually with a broader topic before we get into the specifics of each of your work, and that is kind of this idea of creative leadership. I think it's something that we don't talk a lot about in film school or in coming up, but in each of the roles that you have and as you go through your career, you are actually like managing teams. You're leading a creative team, you're running a set, you're communicating, and I really think that leadership in so many aspects of what we do go hand in hand with the creative work. And kind of so through that lens, I'm kind of curious if any of you can speak to experiences or people that help shape your ability to lead a team or rise up through the ranks.
I guess I can start. You know, there's the notion, like when you're in film school, I guess, of you kind of get there and it's just this group, like trying to figure it all out. So then you've got these 10 voices that are like, maybe you should put the camera here, maybe it'll cut this way if you do close up or a wide shot. You know, there's a lot of voices when you're in film school, or on your early projects. And I think what sets that apart early on is when someone takes reign of the project and says, no, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to light it, and then that's when the projects start to sharpen. And even early on, like early projects for me, where I was like coming out on permit, where, you know, I'm just like would start running gear to someone, they're like, no, just, you know, just wait, we'll tell you what we need. You don't have to bring all the sandbags in, you don't have to bring all the stands in, we'll tell you what we need. Just hang out by the truck. So, you know, just starting out as like a truck guy or whatever, and doing lighting and stuff early on, that was, you know, I would just wait for the orders, and that was, I think that's something, taking orders from a leader like that is really important to learn, and that continues on your entire career, you know. But once you become a department head, there's a different kind of leadership that you have other leaders that you have to, you know, work with. So whether it's you know, the production designer, obviously the director and producer, but all your interdepartment relationships become really important. And you have to kind of think back to those moments where it's like, not 8 departments are going to swarm in at one time and like take over the set. Everyone gets their time. Everyone gets their second, and that'll make it more efficient. And I think that's something about leadership that makes it really easy throughout the day if it runs smoothly like that. So that's something that I feel I learned early on. So, yeah.
I mean, for you, Jim, I mean, you self-identify as a development executive. So you're, or at least it was in your bio, in addition to being a writer-director.
Yeah, it's just like a fairly new thing. So it's the thing I have least experience with. But yeah, happy to talk about it.
Yeah, well, I guess through the lens of like building your own projects or leadership or like this creative development experience, like what does that mean to you? I think that those words are thrown around quite a bit, and can you speak a little bit to your approach?
Sure. Yeah. No, that was. Sorry about that. So the development executive thing is not formally announced, but I'm pretty sure I can say that it's with the Chicago Film Project. So it's a thing that the Hagel Keys thought was appropriate after you know, a year and a half or so of working to develop my own project with them, my debut feature. And so you're curious about leadership in terms of like how that factors into other projects that we're looking at, or?
Well, yeah, or just speak a little bit to what it means to be a development executive. Like, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, so we kind of got to working in that capacity together because of the stuff I was proactively taking on in getting my own film made. So as the writer-director, I was also taking on a lot of the graphics work, doing a lot of the marketing materials, doing a lot of the organizational research where I'd, you know, sort of figure out what film organizations had the best comps, relevant to my script, and I just go ahead and reach out to them on my own. Kind of as the face of the project, but also backed by, a production company that could then talk numbers and that kind of thing, should that conversation evolve into that. So yeah, I think it was just kind of taking the reins and leveraging strengths that I had gleaned in art school, like my design skills to throw together a pitch deck. A lot of writer-directors don't know the first place to start with image sourcing and, resolution and, how to work in InDesign, and those are all things that I figured I could leverage, and I always have leveraged even in my, independent shorts work. I usually do all the marketing materials and email blasts and write all the copy for that, especially, most of us don't have the luxury of publicists, so, it's the kind of thing that, I try to get better and better at all the time.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was I was just really excited when I saw that in your bio, because I think Chicago, personal opinion, needs more of that high level development, especially on independent projects early on. So congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah. No, it'll be nice to be able to sort of apply that stuff to other people's projects as well. So
yeah,
thank
cool. You. Yeah, of course. So Betsy, you've done a lot since our short stint in DePaul, and can you speak a little bit? So you joined Local 600 in 2013, and you started as a digital utility. Can you speak a little bit to what your route has been to kind of climb up through the camera department?
Sure. When I initially started working on student projects, I was kind of doing anything I could to get on set. So I ventured into a lot of different departments and got a lot of different very valuable experience, and had always known that the camera department was where my heart was. And I met a DP on a DePaul project who invited me to come work with him as a grip, which at that point I had not a ton of experience doing, but this was Scott Thiel. And he started hiring me as a union grip on commercials and then passing my name around. And I eventually was hired full-time, being permitted as a grip on a TV show called Mind Games. And a couple months after I had been working on Mind Games and just actively trying to talk to the camera department, they added another camera and were in need of more people. So my key grip was gracious enough to allow me to train with them when we weren't actively setting up a scene. And I finished out the season as the digital utility on a show with 3 cameras full time, which at the time was a lot more cabling than it is now.
Cables.
A lot of cables. Everyone thinks that wireless means that there aren't cables involved, but there's a lot of cable involved. So after that show, I was lucky enough to get opportunities from different people I had met on that set, and was hired as the digital loader on Empire for season 1. I did the pilot as a digital utility, and then after season 1, I stuck with the show and stuck with that group of people who were very gracious and gave me a lot of opportunities to bump up. And by season 6, I was the key first, and I basically was one of the only remaining people from the pilot still working on the series, but it treated me very well. So that was a lot of my experience coming up through one show, but in between each season, I got opportunities to work on all of the Dick Wolf shows, a number of Amazon shows that came in, and a couple features, and that was extremely valuable to be able to work on totally different types of projects. And I just finished the first season of Force here in Chicago.
Literally just finished, right?
Literally
Monday
was our last shoot day.
Yeah, wow. Still wrapping.
Yes.
Less cables, but still cables.
Still cables.
Yeah. Well, I want to, because you two have worked together in the past,
Yeah.
right? And I wonder if you can speak a little bit to like, as a first, like what are the qualities in a DP that you really like working with? And back at you, Chris, like what are the qualities you look for in a first?
I would say that there are a vast majority of qualities in a DP that are great to work with. And there are maybe more select things that are less wonderful to work with. Communication is huge. Being given clear communication on what is expected and what is desired, as well as giving me the opportunity to do my job instead of deciding for me how to do my job. Part of the creative leadership thing that I think a lot of people forget or don't really think about is that everyone thinks about what we do in terms of the visuals and that being the creativity. But so much of our job is learning how to be creative in solving problems and how to learn to interact with totally different types of people and being able to come to a consensus on how to reach the ultimate goal, which is the director and DP's view of their vision. And again, this goes back to like, I think communication is probably the most important aspect of that.
Right. I think as a DP, one of the, a lot of people expect the DP to be like the camera person, but a lot of times the DP is relying on the first to be like the technical person. It's like, I'm not going to come over and say, hey, build the camera this way so it's more, you build it with the operator, and you make it easy for you to work, I won't ever try to come over and micromanage, that kind of scenario. So I think obviously like a technically proficient first AC, but also someone that can be self-sufficient and be like, I got it, go over there, you got to go, whatever. You don't have to tell us where to do this, So I think that to me is like super important. And I mean, honestly, if we can handle each other for like 13 hours a day, that's really a bonus. That is a super bonus right there. So personality is a huge thing, of course, and patience and understanding for each other. I mean, that's like, those are really seem simple, but in the heat of it, after the 13th, 14th hour, it's something that you just really want to hold on to,
Yeah.
And then the crew becomes really family at that point, So.
Yeah, and I hear like the trust in that too. Like there's an element of trust that depending, hopefully on the situation, like if you're working with someone you know is like learned, but sometimes you also have to like give that, I'm assuming, as a gift if it's someone new you've never worked with before, that they're going to trust you and vice versa.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's for sure. That's a
And it can be a long process to getting to that point.
It is a long process. Right, it doesn't happen on the first one. But when it does, it's great.
So Jim, same question to you. In terms of like the DP director relationship. And I also know, I think Rejano has worked with everybody on this panel, so he's kind of the through line here. But in terms of the DP director relationship, like what are the qualities that you really look for and value in a DP? And then Rejano, same question to you in reverse.
Yep.
I think there has to be a instant and natural sort of creative synergy there. And sorry to use such a corporate word, but I think that it's appropriate because, I think a lot of directors, I would argue most directors, have very specific tastes. I, feel like DPs are often that way as well. And there's definitely a palpable and at times devastating breakdown when there is like a creative disagreement, which usually happens at the least opportune time, in my experience.
The devastating.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so in an effort to always mitigate that and not have that happen to you or your film or everybody else, and their time on your set, I think, yeah, it sort of starts with just these casual conversations on like, what do you like? How do you like to work? And just trusting that that person is not, blowing smoke and is, telling you, in fact, what they do like, and they're not just telling you what they think you want to hear, and vice versa. I think, the director has to be pretty sincere about like, no, I don't like that idea, And that doesn't mean that, we're not going to work together, but I think, having those conversations pretty early on, as early and as frequently as possible, is definitely critical.
Yeah. I want to pause for a moment. Jennifer has found her way to us. Please give a welcome to Jennifer Rader. Thank you for making the trek.
No, I'm so sorry. I'm good at giving directions. I'm not good at taking directions.
That's all right. Let's see here. Chris, I want to talk a little bit. So, Betsy's been working a lot in like television, right? Primarily, that's your jam. Jim is doing some independent stuff. I know Jennifer's also doing independent stuff and vice versa. And you kind of span the gamut. You're like, I'm going to casually second unit DP on Candyman. Yeah. Then I'm going to, shoot this award-winning indie. Then I'll do some commercials. Yeah. So can you speak to a little bit to how you kind of navigate those different silos within the industry?
I don't know how I do it, but I do it. I think there was a point where I was doing one thing for a long time. I worked for a long time as like a gaffer and also as a best boy electric. And when I kind of made the decision to commit to camera more, and that was not that long ago. I mean, I was always shooting stuff, but like in 2012 or so is when I got my first TV show as a camera operator, which was Boss Season 2. And, there was just a point where I felt I needed to do it, just shift gears. But then, TV is a grind. Mm-hmm. So after doing 2 or 3 years of TV, I go from one show to the next show and then day play in between, or take over a show halfway through. I did that for about 2 or 3 years. I went back to commercial stuff. And then, commercial pays a lot better. So there's the point where you're like, I would like to do stuff that maybe isn't commercial. I want to do something a little more personal or more independent, or something closer to a director. So a lot of like, I try to get back to independent film roots, which were like my early roots, of course, as like an electrician or grip early on. So those were like the $75 a day movies where you go out and grip and work for 13 hours or whatever. But those are like my roots. I did a bunch of those growing up or coming up. So I came back and went to independent film, met Jennifer, and we did a short that did really well. And then I was convinced. I was like, I'm making the right decisions to do a short for the first time with this director that we just collaborated on a film that went to Sundance. We just kind of got together and met in this location with 20 girls in the cast and made this film. And I was like, this is great. I can do this. I can do independent film. I can go back to commercial. I can do some TV, and then all that will eventually lead me to like a point where something big will come along, and I can do that too. Mm-hmm. And I won't be like,
Yeah.
So, and it's proved to work. But yeah, I think being cognizant of what you want is really important. And if you don't want to work, 6 months out of the year on a show, then don't work 6 months of the year on a show. If you want to give yourself to independent film for half a year, that work will probably still be there to come back to. And if those people that hire you believe in you, they'll hire you back. Commercial producers are the same. If they think you're a good DP, they'll talk to you and they'll sell you on a director, and they'll be like, this is your person. So I think if you just believe in it, you can do it. You can do all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worked for me so far, so
Yeah. Well,
we'll see where it takes it.
what I hear in that is like you really honoring what you want versus honoring what you should do.
That's for sure.
I think especially coming up, that line can get really blurry.
It's true. It's true. I mean, the natural progression would be to do a show, then like come up and do second unit, and then come up and maybe take over the next couple seasons.
Yeah.
Then maybe move to LA and then do another show, and then come back here and shoot. So that's a way of doing it. I guess I've just kind of like done my way of doing it, which is working for me so far. So.
Is there a specific like medium within the industry that you hope to like settle on, or do you like that? Do you enjoy the very?
I like narrative film a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's something I can get really. I mean, that's what I set out to do. Initially, that was what brought me into the business, I guess, or what I wanted to study at film school. So, but I always appreciate the other things for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Jennifer, welcome. I want to chat a little bit. You just came off of VHS 94, and you're in pre-pro. Is that correct? On another one?
No, we actually Chris and I just wrapped a new feature. We wrapped it. It's in post-production right now.
Can you share a little bit about that project?
I can tell you that it's a genre film. It's a ghost story that came together super fast. The script was written by a Chicago-based playwright. It features an Academy-nominated actor. We shot it over 13 days.
Fast.
In an apartment in Avondale. And it's in post-production right now. It was financed by a studio. I mean, I'm being cryptic for a reason only just because we have to be, but it's like an impossible project, that came together really fast. And that a studio, when we said we're going to shoot it in Chicago with a Chicago-based cast and crew, and they were like, okay. It was like, be careful what you wish for, then we had to make it.
Yeah.
But no, we wrapped actually over a month ago, probably mid-July, and it's in post-production right now. Yeah, and that happened, I landed right back from Toronto after doing a section of the new VHS, which will premiere on Shudder on October 6th, and then turned right around and was in prep for this other one. It was really, it was fun. It was actually really fun 13 days is kind of a sweet spot.
Fast.
It was fast for a feature, but it was, it was written with the thought around how to make an independent or a low budget, indie film when we're still, dealing with a global pandemic, so a very, very small footprint in terms of, cast and crew, but somehow we managed to find this little tiny window of time when so many people that we've worked with before were all free. And one of the producers, I can tell you this, there's this incredible producer who's living here in Chicago, Neil Edelstein, who had been, in LA for forever and ever and ever. He produced The Straight Story, he produced Mulholland Drive, he produced The Ring, Fractured. And he lives here now and is totally dedicated to figuring out how to make more big films in Chicago, you know, with Chicago-based cast and crew. And so we got him involved, and you know, that actually felt like the miracle. You know, to have someone at that level, you know, producing a film at this other, you know, kind of level. So yeah,
That's exciting. I can't wait to be able to put names and specifics to the cryptic descriptions. I'm looking forward.
I can just tell you that it's like, I don't know. I mean, there's like seven actors in it, and it just feels like Chicago royalty. I mean, I
That's
just feel
amazing.
so lucky. It's crazy.
That's cool.
Including, I can tell you that what I can tell you is that there's a monster in it that was built by Anthony Cozart of Cozart Studios, and they were just nominated, you know, for an Emmy for their work on Lovecraft Country, and you know, like, just, I don't know, that alone, that collaboration alone is, you know, I mean, I always feel lucky to be making stuff here in Chicago, but, you know, that alone just was like, yeah, you know, Chicago's like the best kept filmmaking secret on the planet.
Totally. Well, and any monster made by Anthony is going to be an amazing monster.
It was great. It's great. Yeah, it's terrifying.
It's great. Okay, so I want to kind of broaden it back out a little bit to our panelists. I think, you know, kind of the blessing and the curse of like being in the film or television industry is I don't really think you ever arrive, right? Like there's this, I think, you know, sometimes coming out of school you have this idea that you're gonna like get there, but there is very vague and undefined and somewhat ethereal, and you can never quite figure it out. And so along the way, you're kind of stretching and you're honing your craft and you're experimenting creatively. And I was wondering if each of you could kind of speak to like a set experience or a particular project that really forced you to stretch. Like was a challenge or really forced you to look at how you work or what you work with in a new way. And what that experience was like for you.
I'll go.
Go, Betsy, take it away.
I would say that first, to your point of like never arriving anywhere, I think that is something that like is definitely a factor in this industry, and it depends on the perception you have of that idea. I still don't necessarily know what I want to eventually do. I feel like everything is a step towards something. So what I have tried to focus most of my energy on is just doing the best possible job I can at whatever it is I'm doing right now, regardless of whether I think that it's what I want to do in the future, because that always has value coming back to it. And I recently was in Abu Dhabi for 2 weeks working on a low-budget feature that was an incredible experience. I went into it knowing very little about it because I was already working on a show, and I took 2 weeks off to go fly halfway around the world. And it was more different and unexpected than I could have anticipated. And I think that it really reinforced a lot of ideas of being able to be flexible in general when you're working, and make compromises with people, and just like feeling it as a community instead of about like your one thing that you're trying to accomplish, because we're all here to accomplish things together, and like none of it's going to happen unless we all work together. And I think that experience really forced me to see things from a lot of different perspectives that I hadn't even imagined having to see them from before. I think that one of the most valuable things that I experienced was going through so many different positions and departments, because I feel like I have a little bit of a better understanding of what other people are dealing with on set when everyone's like so focused on getting their one thing done. But going to a very unfamiliar place where there's a language barrier and there are masks and it's a low budget, it was definitely important to really like step back and kind of take into account how everyone was trying to work, and the fact that I was walking into their world. I didn't want to go in and be like, okay, this is how we do things, so this is how we're going to do it. Even on our prep day, I walked in and I was like, okay, so you guys tell me, what are we doing first? I don't want to command how this is working. And I think that helped me get through the last month of Force, because I really had to do that.
That's great. So what you learned internationally with a whole new experience, new culture, new people, mid-pandemic, was immediately applicable to coming back to Chicago on it.
In a lot of ways.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Chris, what about you?
I guess going to like starting like with the notion of of arriving. I guess as long as you know that like you can arrive, but you might not stay, and that doesn't mean forever, but there will always be something that may not happen for you in the next project or something like that. So I think knowing that you have to keep going with projects all the time is important as a filmmaker. I think one of the more recent projects I did, I worked with some pretty, I'll say inexperienced directors. They had a really great idea, a really great concept, and they leaned really heavily on me for visuals and like to help them like create the look of this project. And it worked really well for us. It was like they had a very specific look, but they didn't know how to convey it on camera. So I was able to like bring out like a camera operator and Steadicam operator, on something independent like that with a low budget, we don't always get the luxury. I don't always get the luxury of an operator. I have to operate as well as like do some lighting, as well as talk with the director. But for this one, because it was such a small, such a small project, I was like, I know we don't have a lot of money, but I would really, really appreciate this just because it would help us. And I think it's some of like the coolest footage I've shot in some time was on this project. Some really like great Steadicam shots. The local Steadicam operator, Maddie Momano, did a really great job. And I'm really excited for everyone to see it. So, and I think just knowing that if you're not doing like a big project, like during COVID, there was so many times where everyone's like, I don't know if I'm going to work again. 2020, yeah. I don't know what's going to happen. But doing a project like that, and then doing like some commercials, like they weren't able to fly out a lot of DPs from New York or LA to Chicago. So I, by default, got a bunch of commercial work like mid 2020, which was pretty good. And by the end of the year, I was like, you know what? I worked very little in 2020, but I made it work, and I made it work with my family, and I made it work in the film world without like losing my mind, like not worrying like, what am I going to do financially? What am I going to do? There was something that kept me going, and that was knowing that pushing hard on one project will keep lifting you for the next one. Yeah. That's something important.
Totally.
Yeah.
So just to underscore, you found that even that like working with some lesser experienced directors and like them leaning on you in a higher creative capacity, like expanded your creative 100%. Range.
100%.
That's cool.
Yeah, and my ability to distribute that to the crew and be like, you guys got to go do this because I got to help them make sure we got the shots to edit and stuff like that. So but it worked out really well. Yeah.
We look forward to seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, over to you, my friend.
So yeah, I think kind of the bigger the project gets, the bigger the idea gets. I think something that I've had to learn recently is the ability to relent control in a lot of ways in order to have that necessary creative growth has been, I'd say, pretty essential. And that's specifically speaking in terms of working with a co-writer on my current feature that's been in development. And it's a concept I had been struggling to write since like 2011. So I'd like pick it up and put it down, and then I'd get overwhelmed because it was super lofty and pretty elaborate for the sort of things I usually get into. And then I started working with my co-writer Shelley Gustafson, and she approached it from the exact opposite angle that I usually do, which is like I try to avoid the 3-act structure. I feel very creatively allergic to it at times.
Sure.
And yeah, her having to convince me that my A, B, and C that I wanted to happen, it could have happened other ways, but with the way that she wanted to structure it and what she kind of wanted to fill these gaps in with, it was the kind of thing that I had been picturing this nebulous idea for like 7 years. So it was a little bit of an adjustment for me to have to understand that there were dependencies to kind of get what I wanted. That in order for it to be sort of like something that an audience could respond to, or even producers, that not that it had to be less weird, it just had to be a little more structured than I pictured. And then so my task now is sort of like visualizing a lot of these things, and like having these conversations with Chris for things that weren't like initially my idea, and just sort of having to like sort of internalize those things and say, how do I do this now? So this comes after so many years of kind of like being like a one-stop shop of me doing everything on my projects. So
yeah, I love that idea of like relenting control. Like I think it's so key, especially in collaborations, to know when to let that up, and to know when to hang on to it. And to your point, it's like a growth spurt with anyone, right? With any new collaborator. I imagine, Betsy, even in your world, you have to kind of navigate that. Cool. Jennifer Reeder, over to you.
I mean, I would say I feel pretty good about where I am right now.
Have you arrived?
Yeah.
Nice. Snaps for that, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, I think it's important to claim that, and to say like, I mean, I spent this pandemic, it's been over a year now, reading a lot of scripts, like being offered, directing roles, and being able to say no to those. Like creatively, like just being able to say no, this is not the right project for me to do, and turning work away feels I don't know, that it's I mean, on the one hand it felt bad, like because I was sort of stunned that there was not better scripts out there, honestly.
Yep.
But I kept that part to myself, like you guys bought this. I mean, I'm a real kind of slow and steady wins the race. I've been doing this for a long time, and so where I am right now, where I have arrived to, is a place where my voice is established, and my vision is established, and so it feels important that then, when I respond to a project, it's I you know, like my voice matters and I'm listened to, you know, and that feels really important, especially very honestly as a woman writer and director, you know, because I still think that we live in a world where if you are not, you know, like straight, white, cis, hetero, able-bodied, you know, male, and I love those guys too, you know, then you nearly have to reinvent the trust every single time, you know, which is exhausting, you know. But I would say that, you know, in terms of a challenge, I mean, Facebook reminded me that today we wrapped Signature Move 5 years ago today.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was challenging, that in the sense that was the first film that I directed that I didn't write. And not only that, but it's, you know, for any of you who have seen it, it's a beautiful, you know, love story about a Muslim woman, a Muslim Pakistani woman who falls in love with a Mexican woman, you know, one hot summer in Chicago. And I know hot summers in Chicago. We all know hot summers in Chicago, right this very minute. I'm not Muslim, I'm not Pakistani, you know, I'm not Mexican. And so taking on subject matter that had to be done with real authenticity, you know, was, you know, I think we've all, as consumers, as an audience person, as a consumer of films, you know, watched films that we liked even, you know, but thought at the end of the day, like, wow, I wonder what that would have been like just to use a very ham-fisted example, you know, I mean, I wonder what, like, you know, The Color Purple would have been like if it was directed by, you know, an African-American woman, for instance, right? Mm-hmm. So, and there's many, many examples of that. So, you know, what I hope at the end of the day is that no one watches our little signature move, which is super continues to kind of chug along, you know, and thinks like, I wonder what that would have been like if it had not been, you know, directed by Jennifer Reeder. You know, I hope that that's all that all gets embraced at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean, taking on material that I didn't write, because I really, with the exception of that one and then the one that Chris and I just finished, you know, I mean, of the something like 57 films that I've made, those are the only 2 that I didn't write that I directed. So, you know, taking on someone else's voice, literally their words, their story, you know, that's selfishly a real and vainly kind of a challenge, you know, like how do I slip myself into someone else's, you know, skin?
Yeah.
But yeah, 5 years ago we wrapped Signature Move in the lawn in front of the planetarium with about 100 other people playing Pokemon Go.
Oh, that's right.
There was a Pokemon Go meetup that we did not plan for, people walking around.
The height of it.
That's crazy. Synergistic, for sure. A quick follow-up question to that. So I know on, you know, Signature Move, Fazia was pretty involved because she wrote it, so that was there. On the recent project that you and Chris did, were you involved with the writer? Was the writer hands-on?
Yeah, well, here's the funny thing about working with a playwright, is that playwrights write words, and they give you a script that's in script format that has no action in it whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I can tell you, this is not a secret, but Brett Nephew wrote it, incredible ensemble writer with the Red Orchid. And he gave me the script, the dialogue was great, and I was like, I mean, people have to do things too. They can't just talk the whole time. And so, you know, Brett and I went back and forth to figure out the shooting script where it wasn't literally just dialogue, you know. And it's also this project has a male lead protagonist. I've I've made one other film called Shove It that Chris shot also that has boys in it. And aside from that, I've never made a film with a man as a lead. So to also, but I wanted to, you know, I loved what Lynn Ramsey did with You Are Never Really Here, the Joaquin Phoenix film, you know, and I love what female directors have done with, you know, masculine stories, and you know, I think this is, at the end of the day, it is like a masculine story. It is a story about a sort of literally like you know, like a man in peril and what that means, you know, that was a curious, you know, curious learning experience too. I mean, even there was one scene where like the actor was supposed to shave. He was like, "Men don't really shave like this anymore," you know. And I was like, "Really? I mean, it looks better," you know. And he was like, "You know, I don't know." It was like a funny moment. I acquiesced. I was like, "You know, fine. We're shooting over 13 days. If you would rather not use, you know, this other razor, it's fine." But yeah, I mean, it wasn't, I didn't feel out of my comfort zone, you know, making a story about an adult man. And I just say adult man because if you've seen any of the films that I've done, most of my films are about, most of them are about teenage girls, or a lot about young girls, you know. So to do something about with an adult male was interesting. But I think that it's also, actually, at the end of the day, Chris and I talked about this a lot, it's actually a film that is sort of bathed in a kind of female gaze, you know, and a sort of a feminine gaze, which feels really productive, you know, right this very minute, not just in cinema, but in, you know, in real life.
Cool. Can't wait for the shaving scene.
I mean, it's pretty impressive and evidently very accurate.
Accuracy, that's what we're going for here, accuracy. All right, I have a question for Betsy, one more quick question for the group, and then we'll take a few questions from the audience, whatever we have time for, so be thinking about it. So Betsy, you are heavily involved in the union. I think there are like 12 committees that you are on, maybe 4. But so for folks who like don't or maybe know what Local 600 is, or like, you know, they're on the outside looking in, like, what do you want folks to know about like what being involved in the union in that capacity means to you?
I think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding about what a union is, what a labor union is, and what its point is. And basically, the point is that we are all here together, and we are stronger together, working towards a greater goal than any individual trying to do it on their own. So basically, the union is here to help uplift each other as well as provide protections. As many people know, the film and television industry tends to be a little bit abusive to the workers, and which is currently of major concern if anyone is following negotiations that are currently happening. Exactly, give us rest. I actually grew up in a household that was kind of anti-union, not because they didn't believe in union, I guess, philosophies, but because they didn't understand them correctly. And basically it's just to keep us all from getting taken advantage of, and to protect each other and support each other. And I have never felt so close to a group of people that I don't know everyone as I do to my fellow union members, and including people that aren't in Local 600. But I mean, like Chris was saying before, after you spend 12, 13, up to 17, 18 hours a day with a group of folks, they start to really become your family. I mean, when was the last time you spent that much time with your family? We're in high school, maybe. I didn't spend that much time with my family then. So the people, I mean, I wanted to do this as a career because I love photography, I love motion film, but once I actually started working in this industry, I fell in love with the people so much more than just the work. So I take part in the union because I care an extreme amount about the people that I work with and the people that are around me every day.
Amazing, thank you. Chris, because you're Local 600 too,
I
yeah?
am,
What does being in the union mean to you?
You know, for me, it's a lot of opportunity for, you know, some great projects and having top technicians around, you know, and then protection. And it's saying, you know, we do long hours, we do brutal hours, but knowing that, you know, somehow we can be protected from that it's important. It's a big thing.
Cool.
For sure.
Jim, final question for you. I want to hear a little bit about the inspiration behind library hours. We talked a little bit about it before, but on your website you describe it as a reimagined approach to vintage erotica that favors empathy over objectification, which is it's a big sentence.
Yeah, that's one of my university sentences. So no, it's funny because the kernel of that sprung from on a whim, kind of as a joke. My ex and I went and saw 50 Shades of Grey on Valentine's Day because we thought we'd be able to just point and laugh at it, and we both came out of that movie really horrified with its messaging and its approach, and you know, the fact that it was so patriarchal for something that was both written and directed by two women, and the source material was also, you know, from a woman, and you know, in spite of that, it was so devoid of any kind of consent. It was like incredibly, like, it was a really like mind-blowing experience that, I mean, that was maybe what, 2015, that movies like that were still being made. And so I kind of thought about the history of kink and fetishism and how that gets represented, and how BDSM gets represented in popular media, and how there always has to be this weird nefarious intent, or they're implying that people that engage in it are mentally ill and they're like filling these voids, or they're, you know, working through some trauma. And you know, that last point, there is truth to that, but the way that it's portrayed is typically just like very outside looking in a way that is not supportive. It's really puritanical. And so I wanted to do something that not only challenged me to try to wholly step outside of the male gaze as like a cis male writer director, but also do something that I could collaborate with the performers and have them sort of like bring their thoughts as to how we all kind of arrive at the same place with the material that I created. And so, you know, part of that was me sort of writing the material for a non-binary fetish model who, you know, knew a lot more about this stuff than I did, and they were kind of, you know, my consultant along the way, on board with the material, but also, you know, questioned when things weren't, you know, as sincere as they could be, or, you know, made suggestions and kind of did their own thing when I didn't necessarily know what the best course of action was. So.
Beautiful, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Where is that film now, or where can folks watch it?
Free on my website.
Okay.
I'd say it's more PG-13 rated if people are kind of skittish about the content. Like, it's not hardcore or anything.
Damn it.
So, I mean, even though it did it got thumbs down off YouTube, I think, because people are still skittish about queer content.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's really nothing in there that is objectionable, in my opinion. So.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking that on and the work. I look forward to watching it. Jennifer, what's next for you? I feel like you've been like back to back in an exciting new way.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I don't know, there's some other stuff coming up.
Okay, cool. We'll leave it at that. Ladies and gentlemen.
I don't mean to, I mean, I'm a little superstitious, you know, on
Fair.
some level, you know, but no, I feel very, I feel in my place of arrival, I feel firm and steadfast, and right now the climb feels significantly upward. I'll just say that.
That's exciting. Cool. Alrighty. Well, as we wrap up our time together here, I want to throw it out to you all. Thank you for joining at home, by the way. Thanks for being here with us. But to folks in the audience, any questions?
There's one back there.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I was just curious about assistance from the union, what since on projects that were out of the country. You said you done something out of the country.
Yes, that's on assistance out of the country. What do you mean by that?
Well, was there any representation once you got a new location, or were you just basically?
The production was in talks constantly with our local business agent here in Chicago, Winona Wacker, and they abided by, for the most part, all of the Tier 1 budget agreements for the crew over there, including the local crew, which was something that our DP was adamant about from the beginning, and I think that went a super long way, because if the DP hadn't been as adamant about it, it would have been very easy for them to kind of skirt around things. But he demanded that the locals were paid the same increments as far as overtime that was concerned, any of our meal penalties, because 600 doesn't have jurisdiction for those local hires, but our DP demanded that the same I guess guidelines for our 600 members that were being followed here in Chicago were going to also be followed in Abu Dhabi with the 600 members and the local crew there.
That's great to hear. And what I want to underscore is like the production worked with your local union rep,
Yeah.
right? So even though there wasn't necessarily a formal jurisdiction, there was like an open line of communication in some ways between the union and the production, which is what I think so many productions oftentimes get wrong at the outset.
Yes, and this production wasn't necessarily super familiar with working with the union, and I'll have to say that our UPM was fantastic and super communicative and seemingly transparent. I can't say for sure. I mean, I felt like he was very honest, which I can say isn't always the experience you'll have. So I think that was very beneficial, that they were having open communications and had talks with our business agent about traveling overseas. Cool. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess maybe a general question, like any thoughts or feelings from the cinematographers and directors into the proliferation of color grading working its way into being such a huge part of cinematography and telling your story? Like, how do you feel about that? Or like, have you ever had your vision changed, or what you thought about how you're shooting something going into post? I mean, basically, like, how much do you as cinematographers like rely on a director's vision when you're shooting something that's going to be so greatly graded? Or, I don't know if I'm posing much of a question, but maybe just thoughts on that process.
well, I can tell you that for Knives and Skin, Chris and I went to Warsaw, Poland to do the color grading, and we did it together in this little tiny dark room.
Oh, you guys worked on that together?
Yeah.
With the colors?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, no, and I think with the film that we just shot, I mean, there's literally something that's called the Death Lut.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, no, we named it the Death Lut, you know, or Chris named it, somebody named it the Death Lut.
Or DIT maybe.
But no, I mean, I think that, you know, you know, I'll speak for Chris and I, who've made a bunch of films together, and we talk about the color before, you know, we could talk about the color a lot beforehand.
Okay.
And both with Knives and Skin and the film that we just shot, we worked with this really great gaffer, Louis Lukasik, who, you know, it's like really collaborative in terms of what is the color palette of the film, and we do as much as we can with practical light, but you know, it's not. Then we go into color grading, knowing kind of already what we want it to look like and having LUTs ready, you know? But yeah, with Knives and Skin, which, you know, is, I think it's still on Hulu, but, you know, it has a very, very distinctive color palette. And I would say the most interesting thing about that, and it had sort of gotten an in-kind color grading package from a really great tiny little company owned by a woman in Warsaw, Poland. So we went to Warsaw in December, which is kind of the opposite of like August in Chicago in terms of the temperature. And the most interesting thing about that experience, I would have to say, is that, you know, when you take a film like Knives and Skin, which actually features a cast with a really wide range of skin tones, to a color grading company in Poland that has dealt with like one skin tone. You know, I mean, I think that was actually the most interesting experience. You know, but we never varied from what the general palette was. You know, but I think that Chris and I work really closely with what the color palette and the lighting, and get as much as we can done practically. You know, I mean, I don't think that we've ever been like bullied by a colorist. No, we've been pretty fortunate, I would say.
Well, I mean, that's fantastic to hear on like from the independent side. I'm guessing maybe it's a little more assembly line on a TV show where you're just kind of turning something over.
Yeah, I think
they have their set look.
Yeah. I think having like a DIT on set that I can work with closely helps a lot, especially with colors, because we do have so many different scenarios, but trying to stay consistent with certain colors is always tough. But a good DIT will kind of keep us honest in general with it. You're like, oh, that green wasn't really the green you had, but I mean, tweak it like that, and that kind of thing. And by the time we get to color, it's, you know, we've already set up the language of the film, color-wise.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take one more question if you got it. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I just wanted to know if you could talk a little bit about sort of the balance between taking passion projects and taking, you know, a project just simply for work. And, you know, how do you balance? I'm thinking about joining the union, but I'm also kind of worried about that too. Like if I want to take non-union jobs and stuff like that, how do you guys balance that?
You can work non-union jobs as a union member at any time that you want to. So being a part of any union does not negate you from being a part of another union or working on non-union jobs. Chris is part of 1076, which is its own union, which is both 600 and 476, and maybe a member of other unions. So being a part of a union is more about being a part of like a community that's together to protect each other. And as far as doing passion projects and balancing that with work that you're doing just for work, it really depends on what your goals are and what your aspiration is. I have done a lot of very specific union work in the past few years, and this will actually finishing this show is the first time that I don't have anything immediately lined up to work on again, which I'm very excited about because I haven't had as much time for passion projects that I would really like to work on more often. And being able to do shorts and lower budget projects with my friends as opposed to just working for a major studio is super fulfilling. I've worked on a few things over this summer, and even though I only had like 40 hours in my weekend and I still was working on some short film, that was more energizing than actually just sleeping the whole time. So I don't know. I think that really depends on what your goals and what your wants are, like Chris was talking about.
Yeah, it's just a balance, you know. But the union work, I mean, it's there. You know, that's not going to go away. So there'll always be that work. But that one passion project that you think is the one, I mean, you could take that chance. You know, it's a 4-day shoot. What's 4 days, right?
And I'll even agree with that even stronger. I do look back on like the last 8 years that I spent literally project after project after project that were large union projects, and some of the things that I passed on or wasn't able to work on at this time, I'm like, I could have done both. Yeah. And I kind of wish that maybe I had. At the same time, who knows what that would have arrived at for me, but I do think that people should remember coming into this industry that it will take over your life very quickly, and making sure that you prioritize your passions and needs and family and your life outside of it is very important.
For sure. 100%.
Did that answer your question? You good? All right. Well, y'all, that's all we have time for today. Please give a round of applause to Betsy, Chris, Jim, and Jennifer for being with us. Thank you so much to AbelCine, IFA, Filmscape, all the folks who made Filmscape happen. Thank you to those of you joining at home. We hope to see you at more events and at Filmscape next year, and have a lovely evening. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Angie.
Thanks, guys.